makontrakta wote wamelipwa. Sina wao wafanya kazi, na wakikoza mimi nitafukuza. Hapana mchezo, hapana. Hii hakuna brotherhood. Fanya kwa hii. Badala kwenda mimi upite na kio. Nitakuwa hapa. So these seat belts ni kitu cha maana. It has been known all over the world that this thing saves life. If you want to rattle a snake, you must be prepared to be bitten by it.
One of his famous soundbites was, "If you rattle a snake, be prepared to be bitten." His name was John Michuki, a no-nonsense Kibaki-era minister and a long-time legislator from Kangema, Murang'a. To many Kenyans, he was the stern man in a suit, the face of authority, discipline, and iron fist reforms. But behind the headlines, the tough talk, and the controversies, there was another side to Michuki's story, one that began in hardship, rose through resilience, and ended with him as one of the wealthiest men in Kenya. Born in 1932 in rural Kangema, Murang'a, John Njoroge Michuki came into the world during the dark years of colonial Kenya. His father died when he was barely 3 years old, leaving him under the care of his widowed mother. Poverty weighed heavily on the family, but even his childhood, Michuki stood out for one thing: discipline. In a time when opportunities for African children were few, his determination to rise above his circumstances became his most valuable possession. He started school at Gathongororo Primary, walking barefoot through the hilly terrain of Murang'a before advancing to the prestigious Alliance High School. At Alliance, young Michuki rubbed shoulders with some of the brightest minds of his generation, who would later become the first leaders of an independent Kenya. But while others played and joked, Michuki carried himself with a seriousness far beyond his years. His teachers described him as sharp, disciplined, and almost stubbornly focused. That discipline bore fruit. When he earned a government scholarship to study abroad, he would find himself at Worcester College, Oxford, in England, studying economics, public administration, and finance. For a young man from rural Murang'a, this was nothing short of a transformation. Oxford polished his intellect and gave him a global outlook, but it never took away his tough, uncompromising streak. When he returned home, independence was on the horizon, and Kenya needed skilled administrators. Michuki joined the civil service, first as a district officer. In those early days, his reputation was already clear: efficient, incorruptible, and ruthless when it came to enforcing rules.
Far a number of Africans taking over now as district commissioners from Europeans?
Yes, there are, as far as I can remember. In fact, I had 8 colleagues with me who became district commissioners at the same time with me. And of course, there before, we had other African district commissioners. In fact, the district commissioner from whom I took over was an African, and he really did introduce me to the district.
You find that as an African, you are accepted and respected by the Africans you deal with in the same way that the European district commissioner has been in the past?
There's no doubt about that. I think people are coming to realize.
But Michuki was never going to be content as just a civil servant. In 1969, he plunged into politics, winning the Kangema parliamentary seat, which he would hold for decades through regimes of Jomo Kenyatta, Daniel Arap Moi, and later Moi Kibaki. He remained a fixture in Kenyan politics, sometimes in the shadows, sometimes at the very center of power. It was under President Kibaki, however, that Michuki's star burned brightest. As Minister of Transport, he introduced the famous Michuki rules, bringing order to Kenya's chaotic matatu industry. Suddenly, speed governors were mandatory, seatbelts had to be worn, and rogue drivers faced the full force of the law. Many cursed him, others praised him, but few could deny that lives were saved. Later, as Minister of Internal Security, he carried the same iron fist approach into law enforcement, cracking down on outlawed groups and urban crime. If you rattled Michuki's snake, you had to be prepared for a bite. Yet even as he built his reputation as a disciplinarian of Kenyan politics, another side of Michuki was quietly taking shape, that of a billionaire businessman. Away from the cameras, Michuki was a master investor. Over decades, he carefully built an empire that spanned banking, hospitality, agriculture, real estate, and insurance. At the center of this empire was one of Kenya's most iconic leisure facilities, the Windsor Golf Hotel and Country Club. Sitting on over 500 acres of prime land in Nairobi's Ridgeways area, the Windsor was more than just a hotel. It was a symbol of power, wealth, and exclusivity. To this day, it remains one of the most prestigious golf resorts in Africa, and Michuki was its proud owner. But that was just the jewel in the crown. In Nairobi's central business district, Michuki owned Cargen House, a towering commercial property through his company Fairview Investments Limited. He also held substantial stakes in the Fairview Hotel, the Mountain Lodge, and had shares in Kenya Airways, New Ken Shoes, Gateway Insurance, and Harry Limited. His agricultural investments were equally impressive. In Murang'a County, he owned 14 parcels of land, including vast tea and coffee estates such as shares in Kanyanyaini Tea Factory, and at the coast, he controlled prime beach land in Kwale County, close to Likoni Ferry, prime acreage that has only grown in value. When details of his estate were revealed after his passing in 2012, Kenyans were stunned at the diversity of his holdings. He owned shares in companies with names that sounded almost ordinary: Silver Homes Limited, Coots Holdings, Darugo Plantations, Kangema Farmlands, agricultural and industrial holdings, but each represented millions in value. He held over 56,000 shares in Mountain Lodge, thousands more in tea and plantation companies, and had significant claims in cash deposits, bank accounts, and even tax refunds running into the tens of millions. By the time of his death, his wealth was conservatively estimated at between 3 billion and 10 billion shillings, though insiders whisper the real figure was much higher. From Windsor's manicured lawns to sprawling tea estates, to urban towers and beach plots at the coast, John Michuki lived the life of a billionaire, quietly, discreetly, and always with the discipline that defined him from childhood. But wealth and power were never the whole story. To his constituents in Kangema, he was remembered as the man who built schools, roads, and hospitals. To his political peers, he was a tough negotiator who never wavered. To his critics, he was sometimes too harsh, too uncompromising. Yet to the ordinary Kenyan, he represented something rare, a man in government who meant what he said and did what he promised. In the end, John Michuki remains etched in Kenya's collective memory as the ultimate no-nonsense minister, from an orphaned boy in Murang'a to an Oxford-educated civil servant to a powerful politician and billionaire businessman. His life is a story of resilience, discipline, and ambition. Love him or hate him, one thing is certain: when John Michuki spoke, the country listened, and when he acted, the country felt the change. And that was the story of John Njoroge Michuki, the iron-fisted minister who carried the weight of discipline on his shoulders and who quietly built an empire worth billions. From barefoot walks in Murang'a to owning 500-acre golf resorts in Nairobi, his journey was nothing short of extraordinary. But the question remains, was Michuki a hero of order or a symbol of power wielded without mercy? His legacy, like the man himself, refuses to be ignored. And yet Michuki was not alone. Behind the curtains of Kenya's politics and business, other powerful families built fortunes that rival and even surpass his. In our next story, we will peel back the curtain on another empire, one that has shaped Kenya's wealth and politics for generations. So if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell because what comes next may shock you even more. Until then, thank you for watching, and remember, in the world of power and politics, nothing is ever as simple as it seems.